A black man holding a $10 million check. The very idea struck her as absurd. It was the middle of the lunch rush at First Heritage Bank in downtown Philadelphia. Sarah Winters, the branch manager, eyed the man seated before her, taking in his worn-out briefcase and off-brand clothing. In her world, that amount of money and his skin color were a mismatch. She picked up his check, looked him dead in the eye as she tore it clean in half, and then tossed the pieces onto his chest. She thought, "Fraud, thief, get this man out of my bank." A dozen white patrons watched as Brandon Coleman remained perfectly still. Not a single person stepped in. Just then the door swung open. Her boss entered, saw the shredded check, and then his eyes landed on Brandon. All the color drained from his face. "Mr. Coleman, sir." The entire bank went silent. Sarah's boss had just shown deference to the very man she had publicly shamed. What was happening? Just who was Brandon Coleman? Stay. That one command had just ended her entire career. In 52 minutes, those 12 witnesses would see her finally understand who she just insulted, and why the word "sir" came far too late. This all happened. It begins like this. The alarm blared at 6:15 a.m., shattering the morning calm in Brandon Coleman's apartment. It went off at the same time every day, a rhythm baked into his bones from 5 years of building an empire from absolutely nothing. His daughter Maya was already up. She was 9 years old, her backpack sitting half open on the kitchen island. She was making toast, and it was a little burnt around the edges, which was exactly how he liked it. "Hey there, morning, baby," he said. "Morning, Daddy. It's the big day." Brandon poured himself a coffee, a dark roast that tasted like pure resolve. "Bank day," he announced. Maya made a face. Boring. If only she had a clue. Tucked inside Brandon's briefcase was a single check for $10 million. The check was from the sale of Coleman Software Incorporated, the result of 5 years of coding at 3 a.m. and endless pitches to investors who saw a liability where they should have seen a visionary. It represented 5 years of fighting to prove that a black man out of West Philly could create something the world would want to buy. And Premier Logistics did want it. They wanted it so badly, they cut a check that had 7 zeros on it. The sale had been finalized just 3 days earlier. Brandon could have opted for a simple wire transfer or even used a mobile app to deposit it, watching the numbers materialize in his account from the comfort of his sofa. But there was a principle at stake. The act of walking into a bank, placing that hard-earned check on the counter, and being treated with the same respect as any other person. That was a lesson his father had instilled in him. Gerald Coleman, a machinist for 38 years, passed away when Brandon was 26. He left his son a briefcase, its leather-aged, its corners frayed, the handle carefully repaired, and a single piece of advice: never let anyone in this world make you feel small. Brandon carried that briefcase everywhere. Inside it now, alongside the check, were his business incorporation documents, the press release about the acquisition, his tax returns, 2 different forms of identification, and bank statements detailing 5 years of steady revenue. Logically, he shouldn't have needed any of this. The check itself should have been all the proof required. But he knew the stories all too well, about black men with large checks being met with suspicion. He'd heard them from friends, from his peers, and read them in countless posts online. He had always told himself, "That won't happen to me. My company is legit. My name is good." And yet he brought the paperwork anyway. The drive to the financial district took 18 minutes. The new First Heritage Bank branch had opened just 6 months prior. It had a grand marble facade and imposing glass doors, the kind of architecture meant to convey integrity. Brandon glanced at his watch. 12:13 p.m. It was the peak of the lunch hour, meaning the bank would be crowded. Plenty of witnesses. Excellent. Witnesses are important when things go as planned. He had no idea they would become even more crucial when everything went sideways. Brandon pushed through the glass doors. The lobby was filled with the scent of fresh currency and pricey cologne. Above, the fluorescent lights gave off a low hum. A security camera blinked from a corner, its timestamp visible. 12 o'clock, 16 minutes and 34 seconds. There were 3 teller stations and 5 desks for customer service. Counter 3 was available, occupied by a woman. She was in her 40s, dressed in crisp business attire, with a nameplate that read, Sarah Winters, branch manager. 16 years in the business. Brandon walked toward her. He held the briefcase in one hand, the check in his pocket, and carried himself with an air of accomplishment. "Good afternoon," he said. "I need to deposit this." He slid the check across the counter. It was for $10 million, payable to Brandon Coleman, signed by the CFO of Premier Logistics, and dated March 11th. Today was March 14th. The check was fresh, valid, and very real. Sarah Winters glanced at the check, then her gaze lifted to meet Brandon's, and her entire demeanor changed. It was a nearly imperceptible shift, but it was a look Brandon knew intimately, one he had encountered his entire life. It was the look that communicated, "You couldn't possibly have earned this." It was the look that implied, "Someone like you doesn't handle this kind of money." It was the look that declared, "I see right through you." Brandon felt a familiar tightening in his chest. It was the sheer exhaustion of having to justify his own existence before a single word was even exchanged. Yet he maintained a placid expression and kept his voice steady. "Is something wrong?" Sarah's smile was a textbook professional courtesy, but her words were anything but. "I'm going to need to see some identification." And so it began. Brandon produced his Pennsylvania driver's license. The address was current, the photo was a clear match, and it wouldn't expire for another 2 years. Sarah scrutinized it, typed something into her terminal, paused, and then typed some more. Her eyes darted from the screen back to Brandon's face, her expression a mixture of comparison and disbelief. "Will you need a second form of ID?" "Of course," he replied. Brandon retrieved his passport from his wallet. It too was current. It too was perfectly valid, with a photo that was an undeniable match. Sarah took it from him, staring at the picture for an uncomfortably long time before holding it up right next to his face. A muscle in Brandon's jaw twitched. "For a deposit?" he asked. "Sir," she replied, and the word was laced with pure condescension. "A sum of this magnitude requires us to verify the source of the funds. It's just protocol." Protocol for whom? The question flashes through Brandon's mind, but he keeps his expression neutral, reaching into his briefcase instead and producing a business card. It reads, "Coleman Software Incorporated, President and Founder." Behind it, a press release dated March 11th, announcing the company's acquisition by Premier Logistics. "Sarah, is there anything else you might require?" Brandon's tone is steady, but a sharp, dangerous edge has crept into it. It's the edge of a man who understands precisely what is unfolding. Sarah's professional smile constricts. "We're just trying to protect you, sir." "Fraud." She lifts her phone and dials an internal line. "Security, could you please come to counter 3? Each word lands with the force of a physical blow. Security. For a deposit. For a perfectly legal business transaction. A gasp cuts through the quiet lobby. It's from the older white woman waiting in line behind him. The woman shuffles her feet, her discomfort obvious, but she says nothing. She doesn't step in, she just watches. They all watch. Officer Thomas Mitchell approaches. He's 50-something, with a 20-year veteran's badge pinned to his chest. He doesn't reach for a weapon or adopt a threatening stance. He simply, "Could you please wait with him while I make a few calls?" Wait with him, as if he were a flight risk, as if he were a threat, as if the color of his skin were proof of criminal intent. Slowly, keeping his hands clearly visible, Brandon reaches into his jacket, retrieves his phone, and sets it face down on the counter. Sarah's eyes narrow. "Sir, what are you doing with that?" "You are not permitted to record in here. Pennsylvania is a one-party consent state," Brandon states calmly. "I don't require your permission." Brandon's voice is pure ice. "And I am not leaving until you either deposit this check or furnish me with a written explanation for its refusal. A red flush creeps up Sarah's neck. She is clearly unaccustomed to being challenged, unaccustomed to men who look like him understanding their rights. Sir, I must ask you to step aside so I can assist the next customer. No, you will either process this transaction or you will explain, in writing, why you are refusing to do so. Sarah draws herself up to her full height. Her voice rings out, loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear.
Sir, this check appears to be fraudulent.
I am unable to process it until its authenticity can be verified. Then call Premier Logistics. Here is the direct line for their chief financial officer. Brandon pushes another business card across the cool marble. Sarah ignores it completely. Instead, she seizes the check, holding it by the very edge between two fingers, as if it were contaminated, as if it carried whatever disease she imagines he has. Where did you get this? The verb choice is deliberate. Not earned, not received, gotten. I earned it, he says, his voice tight, when I sold my company. And what company was that? Coleman Software. We specialized in logistics AI. We had 23 employees, were in business for 5 years, and saw 40% year-over-year growth. Brandon lays out the facts as if he were an attorney presenting his case, because that's exactly what this has become, a trial by a jury of his white peers. Sarah's expression remains a blank mask. And what is it that Coleman Software does, exactly? He just told her. But she needs him to perform for her. She needs him to dance, to justify his existence, to prove he is worthy of standing in her bank with money she has already decided he couldn't have possibly earned. Brandon takes a deep breath and explains it all again. Supply chain optimization, routing algorithms, B2B software. We had clients across 6 states and revenues in the millions long before the acquisition. Sarah listens, nodding along theatrically. She doesn't believe a single word of it. I'll need to contact our fraud department. Then by all means, call them. I'll wait. Sarah picks up the receiver, dials, and deliberately turns her back on him. Her voice, however, is perfectly pitched to carry across the entire bank. It's loud. It's intentional. Yes, hello. I have a customer here with a $10 million check that seems inconsistent. Can you run a verification on it? Inconsistent with what? Brandon thinks. With his face? With his suit? With the color of his skin? Sarah relays the check's details into the phone. Then she pauses, listening. A flicker of something new crosses her face. Annoyance, perhaps. She ends the call and pivots back to Brandon. Sir, I have just been informed that we will require additional documentation to move forward with this deposit. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to... What documentation? He interrupts. I have already provided everything that is legally required. Corporate verification, business licenses, proof of... I have all of it. It's right here in my briefcase. Would you like to review it? Or would you prefer to continue making this about something else entirely? Sarah's face sets like concrete. Sir, I do not appreciate your tone, and I do not appreciate being treated like a criminal for attempting to deposit money that I earned. A heavy silence descends. The entire lobby seems to hold its breath. That's when Sarah Winters makes her choice. She picks up the check. She locks her eyes onto Brandon's, and she rips it. Not with a quick, angry tear, but with a slow, deliberate, methodical motion, straight down the middle. The sound of tearing paper slices through the dead quiet of the bank like a gunshot. Then she rips it again, now in quarters. Someone behind Brandon makes an audible sound of disbelief. It is a sound of shock, of disbelief, but no one speaks. No one moves to stop her. Sarah balls the 4 pieces of paper in her fist, steps out from behind the counter, and hurls them directly at Brandon's chest. Tiny white rectangles flutter down, settling on his polished shoes, his briefcase, and the self-respect he had carried in with him just 52 minutes ago. This check is a forgery, Sarah's voice cut through the quiet bank. And you, sir, are attempting to commit a felony. Security, please remove this man from my bank. The police are on their way. But Brandon remained still, refusing to stoop and gather the fragments of his work. He simply stood there, the focus of 12 pairs of white eyes. The security guard shifted his weight, his unease radiating. A smirk of pure satisfaction played on Sarah Winter's lips. This was it, the critical juncture where Brandon Coleman had to make a choice. To stay quiet, concede defeat, turn and leave. Or he could kneel, retrieve the 4 scraps that were once his check. His entire future, 5 years of his life, the tangible proof of what he had built. He carefully placed them inside an envelope from his briefcase, then met Sarah Winters' gaze, his voice a low, lethal calm. "What is your full name?" "Sarah Winters, branch manager. And you really should go before I have you put in cuffs." "I appreciate that, Miss Winters." Brandon lifted his phone, capturing a clear image of her name badge, then of the check's remains, and finally of the security camera's timestamp, documenting everything. At that moment, the entrance chimed. James Anderson stepped through the glass doors at precisely 12:52 p.m. Regional Vice President, 51 years old, wearing a bespoke suit and the kind of assurance that 25 years in the financial world provides. He was not scheduled to be there. He'd had a lunch meeting just 3 blocks away. He thought he would drop by the new branch unannounced, see for himself how Sarah was managing the midday crowd. What he found was a scene of suspended chaos. A line of 12 customers, frozen. A security officer hovering uselessly near counter 3. And in the center of it all, a black man holding a briefcase and a phone. Torn paper littered the marble floor, and his own branch manager, Sarah Winters, was red-faced and jabbing a finger at the man. "I told you to get out before I call the authorities." Anderson's immediate reflex was to back his manager, to rely on her assessment. After all, she had been with the company for 16 years. She understood the rules. Yet something gave him pause. The man at counter 3. There was a familiarity in his bearing, the way he held himself, not with aggression nor with defensiveness, but with a profound presence, as if he belonged in that exact spot more than anyone else. As Anderson moved closer, he saw the man's face. The recognition was a punch to the gut. "Oh no, oh dear God, no." "Mr. Coleman." The entire lobby went rigid. Sarah's pointing hand fell to her side. The security guard pivoted. The 12 customers all seemed to lean in at once. Brandon Coleman turned his head slowly to face James Anderson. There was no hint of surprise in his expression, only a cold, methodical evaluation. "Mr. Anderson." They knew one another. Sarah's mind raced, trying to connect the dots. How could they possibly know each other? Why would the regional VP address him as Mr.? And why did his voice have that tone, a nervous, almost frantic edge? Anderson's gaze fell to the floor, to the scattered paper. He bent down and picked up a piece, a fourth of a check. He could just make out the words, Lion Dollars, Brandon Cole, Remier Logus. The blood drained from his face. "What?" His voice was a dry crackle. He swallowed hard and tried again. "What has happened here?" Sarah launched into her explanation. "Sir, this individual tried to cash a fraudulent check for $10 million, an obvious fake. I denied the transaction and summoned security as per procedure. Then he became hostile, began filming me without consent, and wouldn't vacate the premises." "Stop!" The word from Anderson sliced through her defense like a razor. "Just stop talking." Sarah blinked, stunned. She had never, ever heard him use that tone. Not to her, not to a soul. Anderson looked at Brandon. He truly saw him. He saw the phone still on the counter. He saw the contained fury in Brandon's stance. He saw with perfect, horrifying clarity what had just transpired. "Mr. Coleman," Anderson's voice was now cautious, deferential, and laced with terror. "Sir, I was hoping we could discuss this in my office." "Sir." That one word landed in the lobby like a grenade. The color washed out of Sarah's face. The customers began whispering amongst themselves. The security officer took a distinct step backward. Not "sir," the way Sarah had spat it out with contempt. This was, "Sir," with consequence, with deference, with a clear acknowledgement of power. Brandon did not budge. "Your branch manager just publicly accused me of a crime, destroyed my personal property, summoned security, and threatened my freedom. And your solution is a private chat?" "Mr. Coleman, please, I can resolve this." "Resolve what?" Brandon's voice remained quiet, controlled, but now it was backed by pure steel. "Are you going to resolve why your employee automatically assumed a $10 million check was beyond the means of a black man? Can you resolve why she didn't bother with a single phone call for verification before ripping it to shreds? Can you resolve why I was required to show 3 separate forms of identification when the white lady standing behind me only had to produce one?" The elderly, well-dressed woman in question gave a small, firm nod. She had indeed only shown one ID. She had been paying attention. Anderson's face was now a mask of white, utterly bloodless. He knew exactly what this was, the optics of it, and the price the bank was about to pay. "Sir, there has been a profound misunderstanding." "There has been no misunderstanding at all." Brandon lifted the envelope containing the pieces of his check. "Your manager understood with perfect clarity. She looked at a black man with substantial assets and concluded that I was not worthy of respect, not worthy of fundamental customer service, and certainly not worthy of the same benefit of the doubt you extend to every single white person who walks in here." Sarah tried to interject. "I was just following our protocol." "Which protocol is that?" Anderson whirled around to face her. "What procedure, exactly, instructs you to shred a client's check before you've even verified it? What policy tells you to summon security for a deposit? What policy is that?" He caught himself, visibly reining in his temper, and faced Brandon again. "Mr. Coleman, sir, I am begging you to give me an opportunity to resolve this." Brandon's gaze shifted from him to Sarah, to the 12 onlookers, and to the security officer who had let it all happen. Then his eyes landed on the envelope with the remnants of his check. "You can't fix this, but for starters, you can get her away from me." Anderson didn't waste a second. "Miss Winters, in my office, immediately." Sarah started to object. A single look from Anderson was enough to silence her. She walked stiffly toward the back of the bank, humiliated and utterly bewildered. Anderson refocused on Brandon. "Sir, I want to offer my deepest, most sincere apology. An incident like this is inexcusable. I recognize you, and I know your company. We spoke at the FinTech conference last year. I was pitching you on our banking solutions. You had the decency not to point out that our institution just treated you like a common thief." The memory clicked for Brandon. Anderson had been persuasive. He'd spoken about building banking relationships, offering tailored services, and appreciating the unique path of tech founders. "How ironic. Your sales pitch was incredibly compelling," Brandon stated. "You talked a great deal about respect, about viewing clients as partners, and about realizing that success doesn't look the same for everyone." Anderson shut his eyes for a moment. "I stood by every single word of that." "Did you happen to share that sentiment with your branch manager?" The silence was telling. "Mr. Coleman, sir, I'm asking you, can we take this conversation somewhere private? I will have a new check cut for you right now. I will offer a personal apology. I'll do anything you want to keep this quiet." Anderson stopped himself. "To make this right. Make it right." The phrase felt sour in Brandon's mouth. "Your establishment just publicly shamed me, destroyed my property, accused me of being a criminal, and traumatized a dozen witnesses, all because your manager judged me on sight, and now you want to make it right in private, where I'll sign something and just vanish? That isn't what That's precisely what this is." Brandon picked up his phone and stopped the recording. 52 minutes and 18 seconds. "I'm through here. I'm taking this check to another bank, one that actually sees me as a person. Mr. Coleman, I implore you, at least allow me to replace the check." "You are not authorized to replace it. Premier Logistics issued that check. You have no power to reissue a check on their behalf. What you are proposing is a cashier's check from your bank, which would mean your bank is assuming the debt Premier Logistics owes me. That means you're attempting to insert your institution into their transaction, which is just a way for you to control the story. Anderson was stunned. This wasn't some guy he could placate. This was a man who knew precisely how banking worked. Brandon went on. So this is how it's going to go. I will get in touch with Premier Logistics. They will cut me a new check. I will deposit it at a different institution, and after that, I will determine my next steps regarding this situation. He gestured around the lobby, at the pieces of paper on the floor, at Sarah Winters pacing anxiously, visible through her office window. What do you mean by that? Brandon looked Anderson square in the eye. Sir, he said, letting the word hang in the air with deliberate mockery. Do you honestly believe this is the first time your branch manager has behaved this way? Do you really think I'm the first black man she's treated like a criminal? Anderson's lack of a response said everything. That's what I thought. Brandon headed for the exit, then paused and looked back. And one last thing. The older woman who was behind me in line saw the entire thing. You need to get her information. You need her testimony. Because if you even think about trying to spin this as anything other than what it was, she is my proof. The elderly woman, Helen Davis, took a step forward. My name is Helen Davis. My customer identification number is 8832.4491. I have been a customer here for 30 years, and I witnessed the whole exchange. That young man did absolutely nothing to provoke this. Your manager racially profiled him. It's as simple as that. She scribbled her number on the back of a deposit slip and gave it to Brandon. If you find yourself needing a witness, you call me. Brandon accepted the slip, gave her a grateful nod, and walked out. Anderson was left standing in the lobby, surrounded by scraps of paper, a dozen staring customers, and the disappointed gaze of Helen Davis. And behind the glass of her office, Sarah Winters was waiting for him to solve the problem. There was no solving this. The word "sir" had been delivered 52 minutes too late, and James Anderson knew exactly what was coming. Lawyers, the press, an internal investigation. Everything he had worked 25 years to build was now jeopardized by the prejudice of one branch manager and his own 45-second failure to recognize a client. He leaned over and began to gather the pieces of the check from the floor. $10 million torn into 4 pieces. It was the most expensive blunder his bank had ever made. Brandon just sat in his car for a full 15 minutes. His hands were glued to the steering wheel, trembling not from fear, but from pure, unadulterated rage. The recording was safe on his phone. 52 minutes of it. Every condescending word, every false assumption, every single second of his public humiliation. He had the option to erase it. He could ring up Premier Logistics, have them reissue the check, switch banks, and just put it all behind him. He could teach his daughter that keeping your head down is smarter than speaking out. Or his phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. He let it go to voicemail. A text came through right after. Mr. Coleman, this is James Anderson. I'm asking you to please call me. I am desperate to make this right. Brandon deleted the message. A second call came from the same number. This time, he picked up and said nothing. Mr. Coleman, this is James Anderson. I'm asking you, please, don't hang up. What do you want? The question was flat, devoid of warmth. Anderson's voice on the other end was tight with strain. Because you deserve an explanation, an apology, a real chance for me to make this right before you decide to go down a road you can't come back from. You think I'm the one who's going to have regrets? Regret like bringing in lawyers, like taking this to the media, like painting a picture for the world of how our bank handles customers who don't fit a certain profile. Mr. Coleman, please, I understand you're furious. You don't have a clue what I am. The line went dead quiet for a moment. When Brandon spoke again, his voice was ice. Let me tell you what I know, Mr. Anderson. That branch manager of yours didn't just roll out of bed and invent a new way to humiliate a black man over a valid check. This is something she was taught. It's baked into your system. It's your company's procedure disguised as security. That is not our protocol. Oh, right. So Sarah just went rogue. Is that it? Because from my perspective, your bank made it crystal clear what my value is. Zero. In fact, less than zero. I'm a problem that needed to be erased. That isn't true. Then prove me wrong. A beat of silence from Anderson. What are you asking for? I want access to Sarah Winter's complete personnel file. I'm talking every single customer complaint, each performance review, and any incident reports with her name on them. I need to see if she has a history of this, or if I'm just the first one who refused to be swept under the rug. I can't release employee files. That information is confidential. Then my lawyer will get them during discovery. The word hung in the air between them. Discovery. The legal process. It was the confirmation of Anderson's worst fears. Mr. Coleman, sir, just meet with me. In person. Let me explain the situation and prove to you how seriously we are treating this. A harsh, humorless laugh escaped Brandon's lips. You seriously want me to set foot in that bank again? In the same lobby where your manager practically branded me a felon? No, not the bank. My office, it's private. Or somewhere neutral. A coffee shop, maybe. You name it. Please. Brandon considered it, running through the possibilities. He had the recording, and that was his trump card. But a trump card is useless if your opponent doesn't know you hold it, and that you're prepared to play it. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the coffee shop on Market Street. You know which one. Yes, of course, I'll be there. Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Truly, thank... Brandon cut the call. The drive home was a blur. Maya was spending the night at a friend's place. His apartment was silent, empty. He dropped into his desk chair, flipped open his laptop, and typed in a search. Banking Discrimination, Philadelphia. The screen instantly filled with links, news articles, class action lawsuits, confidential settlements. It was a deluge of stories, all echoing the same theme. Black customers being denied service, grilled with questions, and handled like criminals. He narrowed his search to First Heritage Bank complaints. The results were thinner this time. The bank clearly had a good system for bearing its problems. But then he found it, a thread on Reddit, an anonymous post from 2 years ago. The post read, "Anyone else run into issues with First Heritage in Philly? Had a manager there who was convinced my check was fraudulent, demanded to see my tax returns just to deposit a $5,000 check. For context, I'm black. My buddy, who's white, deposited $10,000 that same day, and all they asked for was his driver's license." There were 14 replies. Story after story was unnervingly similar. The branches were different, the managers had different names, but the underlying pattern was identical. Brandon meticulously screenshotted the entire thread, creating a new folder on his desktop. He was building his case. Just then, his phone vibrated. An email from Jordan Hayes, a civil rights lawyer he'd connected with at a conference. They had maintained a professional connection built on mutual respect. The subject line was simple. "Hey, Brandon, noticed you were active on LinkedIn pretty late. Hope everything's all right." Brandon just stared at the message. Jordan Hayes, 12 years in the trenches. His specialty was discrimination, employment, housing, exactly this kind of public accommodation case. Brandon's fingers moved across the keyboard. "Need to talk," he added. "Are you available?" Less than 30 seconds later, a reply popped up. "Call me now." Brandon hit the number. "Jordan Hayes." "Jordan, it's Brandon Coleman. I think I need a lawyer. Tell me what's going on." So Brandon did. He recounted every last detail, the interrogation-style questions, the looming security guard, the ripped-up check, and the hollow "sir" that was offered far too late. He mentioned the 52-minute recording, a long pause on the other end. "Wait, you recorded it?" "I did." "Were there witnesses?" "About 12 other customers. One of them gave me her number." "Okay, Send it all to me. I'm on board. We'll work on contingency. No fee unless we get a settlement or a verdict. I'm not after money, Jordan. I want them to be held accountable. Brandon, there's a good chance you'll get both, but I need to be completely upfront with you. If we move forward, we're going to do it loud. We file official complaints, demand formal investigations. We raise hell, because quiet complaints lead to quiet, sealed settlements, and the needle never moves. I understand. Are you sure? Are you ready for your name to be plastered all over the news? For your business to be linked to a discrimination suit? For the public to choose sides? Brandon's mind flashed to Maya, to the company he'd built, to the true price of making a stand. Then his thoughts shifted to the 12 other customers, all white, who saw everything and chose to stay silent. He pictured Sarah Winter's smug smile as she tossed the pieces of his check at him. He thought about the next person who looked like him walking through those doors. I'm ready. Good. I'll start drafting the complaint immediately. First stop will be the State Banking Commission, but we might take this federal. This has Civil Rights Act violation written all over it. I'm going to need a copy of that recording, the witness's contact info, and a detailed timeline of events from your perspective. It'll be in your inbox tonight. One last thing, Brandon. The bank will come to you with a settlement offer. It will be fast, private, and probably very generous. They'll promise to change their ways, and all they'll ask for in return is your silence. I'm counting on it, and silence is not for sale. Jordan's voice warmed with respect. In that case, let's go get loud. The call ended. Brandon immediately got to work, attaching the files. The audio recording, Helen Davis's contact information, the timeline he'd just written, photos of the torn check, the entire package. And then, on impulse, he did something he hadn't even considered an hour ago. He opened LinkedIn and started to type. His post was brutally simple, aimed at a professional network of thousands, clients, partners, investors. Today, I walked into a bank with a $10 million check from the sale of my company. I walked out with its shredded pieces and a stark reminder that success doesn't erase assumptions. I'm sharing this because silence is the shield for broken systems, and I'm done shielding systems that refuse to protect people like us. He names no names, posts no video, just the unvarnished truth. Simple, clear. He hits publish. Within the hour, it exploded. 200 comments, 500 shares, voices from his past, people he hadn't spoken to in years, all reaching out with the same message. This happened to me too. Thank you for speaking up. Let me know if you need support. Then came the journalists, 3 of them, from local news outlets, the Philadelphia Chronicle, NPR. Brandon replied to just one, Elena Martinez, an investigative reporter with the Philadelphia Chronicle. Her profile was sharp, 2 years dedicated to exposing financial discrimination. Her message was direct. I'd like to hear your story, off the record first, if you'd prefer. The next day they met on neutral ground, a small coffee shop downtown. Elena came prepared, laying out her credentials in a portfolio of investigations that had held 3 banks and 2 mortgage companies accountable. I'm not here to sensationalize, Elena stated. I'm here to document. Brandon laid out his evidence, the recording, the confetti-like pieces of the check, and Helen Davis's contact information. Elena just listened, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. Her approach devoid of judgment or theatrics. It was pure documentation. This isn't just about you, she said, finally looking up. I know you realize that if we publish this, others will come forward. People who've had the exact same experience but were afraid to speak out. This could snowball into something much bigger than one torn check. Good. Elena studied his face. You're sure? Because once this goes public, there is no pulling it back. The bank will come at you hard. They will hire PR firms, and they will try to tear your reputation apart. They'll try to make this about anything and everything except the truth. Let them try. Okay, I'll need to verify every detail. Talk to witnesses. Get the bank's official response. This might take a week, Take all the time you need. They parted ways, and Brandon headed to his meeting with James Anderson. Another coffee shop on Market Street, 10 a.m. Anderson was already waiting, having arrived early and ordered a coffee. He had clearly rehearsed his lines. Brandon sat across from him, offering only silence. Anderson broke it. "Mr. Coleman, thank you for coming. I know yesterday was... I can't begin to imagine how you felt, how you must feel now. I need you to know that we are taking this extremely seriously." "Are you?" "We're already implementing additional training and are fully committed to making sure something like this never, ever happens again." "What investigation?" Anderson blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry? You said you're investigating. What exactly is there to investigate? Whether your manager actually tore up my check? I have it on video. There were a dozen witnesses. I'll ask again. What is there to investigate? We need to understand the factors that led to her decision. The factor that led to her decision was the color of my skin. Mr. Coleman, Brandon, if we are going to discuss my public humiliation, you will use my first name." Anderson swallowed hard. "Brandon, I don't believe Sarah is a racist. I think she made a terrible error in judgment. I think she was being overly cautious. I think... And you think that makes it any better? I'm just being careful. I'm not racist, I just have standards. I'm not racist, I just know what fraud looks like. I am not making excuses." "Yes, you are. That is precisely what you're doing. You are making this entire conversation about her intentions instead of my reality. You are making this about protecting your employee instead of demanding accountability." Anderson fell silent. Brandon pressed on. "Here's what I want to know. How many complaints, specifically from Black customers, have been filed against Sarah Winters?" I can't disclose confidential personnel information." "Then I will get it another way. Discovery, public records requests, the Freedom of Information Act. I've retained an attorney, and this is his specialty." The color drained from Anderson's face. "Brandon, please, let's not make this adversarial. Let me make this right. We can compensate you for your trouble. We will ensure Sarah faces the appropriate disciplinary action. We will implement new oversight. Just tell me what you need." What I needed was basic human respect. I needed your branch manager to take 30 seconds to call Premier Logistics instead of spending 10 minutes systematically dismantling my dignity. I needed to be called sir before the damage was done, not as a cheap apology after the fact. That word again, sir, it hung in the air between them like a piece of evidence. "I'm sorry," Anderson said, and for the very first time, the words sounded genuine. "I am truly sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry it took me 45 seconds to recognize who you were. And I am sorry that in those 45 seconds, you lost something I can never give back." Brandon Anderson knew a lawsuit was inevitable. He knew a tidal wave of bad press was coming. He knew this conversation was his final, desperate chance to contain the fallout. "Your apology changes nothing," Brandon said, rising to his feet, "but I appreciate the sentiment. I will be filing a formal complaint with the State Banking Commission. I will be sharing my story publicly. And when other victims come forward, and I assure you they will, I will be there to support them too. Brandon, so we can make this go away with no one taking responsibility, no real change, and nobody ever finding out. Your bank literally teaches its managers to profile people. We do not train them to do that. Then where did Sarah pick it up? The question hangs in the air. Brandon starts for the door, then pauses and looks back. "Yesterday, you called me sir. That was after your branch manager had already thrown my check back in my face, after she'd already called me a criminal. It was after she had already shamed me in front of 12 other people. You decided to call me sir long after it had lost all meaning." Anderson is speechless. "The next time a Black customer comes into your bank, maybe try saying it a little sooner." And with that, Brandon is gone. James Anderson is left alone with his cold coffee and the chilling realization that the word sir would echo in his mind for the rest of his professional life. On April 8th, Elena Martinez's story is published. It hits the digital front page of the Philadelphia Chronicle with the headline, Banking While Black. The story centers on one ripped check, 52 minutes of audio, and a simple question about who is worthy of respect. The piece laid out Brandon's ordeal, included a statement from witness Helen Davis, and featured key clips from the recording. Not the entire 52 minutes, but more than enough. There was Sarah Winter's voice, sneering, "You probably can't afford lunch." Then, the distinct sound of paper being torn. And through it all, Brandon's steady, composed response. "What is your full name?" Followed by the moment the door swings open and James Anderson's voice cuts in. "Mr. Coleman, sir." Elena's breakdown of the events was incredibly precise. The word "sir" didn't make an appearance until minute 52. The public humiliation had started at minute 1. Her article posed the question, why did it take 51 minutes for respect to show up? By midday, the article had 400,000 views. By that night, it had reached 1.2 million. The comments section exploded, becoming a forum for personal accounts. Real individuals telling their own stories, all pointing to the same bank and the same troubling behavior. First Heritage, 2019. They demanded 3 of my pay stubs just to deposit a $2,000 check. I'm black. The white guy in front of me only had to show his driver's license. Sarah Winters personally shot down my application for a small business loan. She told me my business plan was unrealistic. I'm a medical doctor. The loan was for $50,000. I had $120,000 in assets. It was a different branch, but the same treatment. They left me sitting there for 40 minutes just so they could verify my employment. I'm an engineer at Boeing. The pattern is just impossible to ignore. 17 people even posted their contact details publicly. They were ready to act as witnesses. They demanded that their own experiences be brought to light. Jordan Hayes officially submitted a complaint to the Pennsylvania State Banking Commission. The case was assigned number DO2-41563. Complainant Brandon Coleman. The nature of the complaint listed discrimination based on race, the destruction of his personal property, and a clear violation of customer rights as defined by federal banking regulations. The commission immediately launched an investigation and put out a statement confirming that all financial institutions in Pennsylvania must adhere to fair lending and fair service laws. This complaint will be investigated to the fullest extent. First Heritage Bank issued a response. It was a standard corporate PR release. We are taking these allegations with the utmost seriousness. Ms. Winters has been suspended while we conduct an internal review. We are deeply committed to fostering diversity, inclusion, and providing respectful service to every single one of our customers. The language was meticulously chosen. It didn't admit any fault, offered no apology to Brandon, and completely ignored the emerging pattern of similar incidents. The comments below their statement were brutal. Too little, too late. She was suspended only after you got exposed. What about the 17 other complaints? Brandon's post on LinkedIn had now been shared 50,000 times. Total strangers were voicing their support. Leaders from various industries were pledging their solidarity. He received 3 invitations to speak at events and 5 requests for podcast interviews. He turned down nearly all of them, but said yes to one. NPR's All Things Considered. The interview lasted for 15 minutes. Brandon's voice remained composed and level. He wasn't angry, he just stated the facts. The host asked, "What did you feel when she tore up your check?" Brandon replied, "I felt the same thing I've felt my whole life. The sheer exhaustion of constantly having to justify my presence in places where the color of my skin creates suspicion before my accomplishments can even speak for themselves." The host followed up, "And when Mr. Anderson said, 'Sir,' Brandon took a moment before answering. It felt like he was apologizing to the wrong version of me. He was saying 'sir' to the successful business owner he finally saw, but he needed to be saying it to the black man his employee had just degraded, because respect shouldn't have to be earned through recognition. It's supposed to be the default." That segment went incredibly viral. The phrase, "respect shouldn't require recognition," quickly became a trending hashtag. On April 10th, Brandon's phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but he had started answering them. "Mr. Coleman, my name is Anthony Richardson. I was a customer at First Heritage back in 2018. Sarah Winters was the one who rejected my loan application. I filed a complaint, and they ended up paying me to keep my mouth shut. I had to sign an NDA, but I'm willing to violate it if it will help your case." Brandon instantly thought of that old Reddit thread. The anonymous story finally had a name. Brandon cautioned him, "Anthony Richardson, breaking a non-disclosure agreement can have serious consequences." "I'm aware," he said, "but after watching your interview, after seeing you take a stand, I realized that my silence was just protecting them. And I am finished protecting the people who cause us harm. Send me your contact information. I'll have my lawyer get in touch." And Anthony Richardson, "Thank you." "No, my friend, thank you for refusing to be quiet." And they began to multiply. By April 15th, 23 people had reached out to Jordan Hayes. The stories spanned different years, involved various branches, and named different employees, but they all pointed to the exact same pattern. While Sarah Winters wasn't at the center of every incident, a clear pattern emerged. Snap judgments, invasive questioning, hostile service, and a fundamental denial of basic human respect. The State Banking Commission broadened its investigation, shifting from Brandon's single complaint to a full-blown institutional review of every First Heritage branch in Pennsylvania. They were digging into 6 years of customer grievances, analyzing patterns and building a timeline, with preliminary findings due in 90 days. First Heritage Bank stock took an 8% hit. Not a catastrophe, but it was enough to make board members start asking hard questions and investors demand answers. Then, on April 20th, something unexpected happened. The Philadelphia business community mobilized. With city leaders uniting for accountability, 23 chief executive officers co-signed an open letter supporting Brandon, vowing to review discriminatory procedures within their own companies. They committed to full transparency and holding institutions accountable, proving they were putting real action behind their words. A combined $15 million in deposits were pulled from First Heritage, not permanently, but as a powerful statement. It was a move Brandon never asked for. He never imagined strangers would weaponize their capital to defend his dignity. But there it was on April 22nd, solidarity quantified in spreadsheets. A rally swelled outside First Heritage headquarters, with 200 people organized by local civil rights groups, and Brandon attended. He brought Maya with him, who was nervous. "Daddy, why are all these people here?" she asked. "Because they think fairness matters." He wondered if it did, looking out at a crowd of faces he didn't know, all defending a principle that cost them little, but meant the world to him. The event began as speakers came forward to share their stories, other victims, other banks, and other moments when a simple "sir" came far too late or never came at all. Then Helen Davis spoke, the elderly white woman who had been in the bank. She was 86 years old, a customer for 30 years, and she was closing her accounts. "I stayed silent in that lobby," she confessed. "I watched that young man get treated like a criminal, and I said nothing until it was over. I'm ashamed, and I'm not staying silent anymore." Applause erupted, not just for her, but for the acknowledgement, for naming the complicity. Brandon watched, his mind turning to James Anderson. He thought about the word "sir," and how respect given late is just regret wearing a costume. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Anderson. "Can we please talk? This has gotten out of hand." Brandon didn't respond because it hadn't gotten out of hand. It had finally gotten into the right hands. Public hands. Accountable hands. That night, for the first time since March 14th, Brandon Coleman slept through the entire night. On May 3rd, an anonymous email appeared in Elena Martinez's inbox. The subject was direct. "You need to see this." The attachment was a 52-page PDF, an internal training manual titled Customer Risk Assessment Protocol, version 3.2, dated March 2022 and marked confidential. Elena opened it and began to read. By page 10, she was calling Brandon. You need to see this. They met at a coffee shop, the very same one where Brandon had met Anderson, though this time promised a very different outcome. Elena slid her laptop across the table. Someone inside the bank sent this, a whistleblower. They won't identify themselves yet, but look at Section 2. Brandon read the heading, Enhanced Due Diligence Triggers. The list included deposits exceeding $50,000 from non-established customers. It also flagged transactions from high-risk zip codes. In Appendix C, those zip codes were listed. Brandon recognized them immediately. They were West Philadelphia and North Philadelphia, neighborhoods that were predominantly Black and Latino. The policy wasn't explicitly racial, but it was functionally racial. Section 3 described unlikely customer profiles, defining them as deposits or transactions that seem inconsistent with customer presentation. The phrase customer presentation was left completely undefined, a purely discretionary code. They trained her, Brandon said quietly. Sarah Winters didn't invent her suspicions. She was taught them. Elena nodded in agreement. And there's more, she said, pulling up another document. Look at the performance metrics from the branch manager evaluations. Sarah Winters' review from the fourth quarter of 2023 read, exceeds expectations. Her key strength was listed as proactive fraud prevention, citing 12 identified high-risk situations. A bonus of $8,500 was tied to this metric. As Brandon cross-referenced the dates, he saw those 12 situations align perfectly with customer complaint dates. 11 of those complaints had come from customers of color. Sarah Winters was rewarded for discrimination, literally paid to make assumptions. This isn't about one branch manager, Elena said. This is policy. Does Jordan know? I'm sending it to him now. Jordan Hayes received the documents and called Brandon within the hour. This changes everything, he declared. We're not just suing for individual discrimination anymore. This is systemic, institutional. This goes straight to the board level. Can we prove they knew? Working on it, Elena said. But this training manual, someone had to approve it. Someone budgeted for the bonuses. Someone decided customer presentation was acceptable criteria. That's not Sarah Winters. That's corporate. It was now May 4th. Elena published her follow-up investigation under the headline, Leaked Documents Show Discrimination Training at First Heritage Bank. The article laid it all out with excerpts from the manual, an analysis of the targeted zip code list, and the details of Sarah Winters' performance review. It connected the dots between bonuses and complaints, leading to an unavoidable conclusion. First Heritage Bank didn't have a rogue employee problem. They had a policy problem cleverly disguised as fraud prevention. The reaction was immediate. Banking industry trade groups quickly distanced themselves. The governor of Pennsylvania then issued a public call for a comprehensive investigation and complete accountability. The news broke like a thunderclap. Federal banking regulators were launching a review, and in the fallout, First Heritage stock took a nosedive, dropping 14% in the worst single-day decline in the company's entire history. On May 6, the bank scrambled to issue a response. CEO Richard Morrison stood before a crowd of reporters at a hastily called press conference and read from a prepared statement. We are both shocked and dismayed by these allegations. He claimed the training materials at the center of the scandal were put in place by a former regional director, operating without the board's knowledge or proper oversight. They do not reflect our values, Morrison insisted. We have already suspended the program and are launching a comprehensive internal review. A reporter immediately shot back. If the board never approved this training, then who did? We're currently investigating the entire approval chain, Morrison replied, but the reporter pressed on. The training manual is dated 2022. It's been in use for 2 years. Are you telling us the board was completely unaware? The CEO deflected. We are reviewing all of our materials and processes. The reporter changed tactics. What can you tell us about the performance bonuses that were tied to discrimination complaints? Morrison stonewalled. I am unable to comment on personnel matters. Another reporter jumped in. Mr. Coleman stated that your regional VP, James Anderson, only addressed him as Sir after he recognized who he was. Does your bank train employees to only show respect to customers they can identify? Morrison fell silent for a moment before weakly answering, "Of course not." Mr. Anderson's response was entirely appropriate once he understood the full scope of the situation, he added. The reporter seized on the phrasing. So the situation required understanding before it warranted respect? That exchange immediately went viral, and Morrison's clumsy inability to give a straight answer became the defining narrative. The clip was everywhere, seen as definitive proof that the bank simply didn't grasp the core of the problem. The message seemed clear. Respect from them was earned through recognition, not given as a default. By May 8th, what started as 23 victims had grown to 31, as 8 more employees came forward. "We were trained to act this way," one said. "We genuinely thought it was the official protocol." A former employee, Kerry Wilson, who'd served as a compliance officer for 15 years, then provided a mountain of additional documents. He had email chains, sealed settlement agreements, and a statistical analysis that was utterly damning. It revealed that 89% of all discrimination complaints originated from customers of color, despite that group only making up 34% of the bank's total customer base. In his statement, Terry Wilson explained, "I tried to raise these concerns internally. I was told that paying out settlements was simply cheaper than changing the corporate culture. I handed in my resignation in 2023, he said. "I should have done it much sooner." With this new evidence, Jordan Hayes filed an amended complaint. It was no longer an individual case. It was now a full-blown class action lawsuit, alleging a pattern and practice of discrimination and a violation of the Civil Rights Act. The demands were sweeping: institutional reform, third-party oversight, and the public disclosure of all settlements dating back to 2018. The request for damages was left completely uncapped. The State Banking Commission immediately announced a public hearing for May 14th, which would be live-streamed. All parties would be required to testify under oath. Brandon would testify, Sarah Winters would testify, James Anderson would testify, and CEO Richard Morrison would be forced to answer for everything, as the entire country tuned in to watch. On May 10th, a letter arrived for Brandon from the law firm Morrison and Blake on behalf of First Heritage Bank. It was a settlement offer with confidential, generous terms, $2.5 million. It also included a strict NDA and demanded the withdrawal of all complaints. The agreement also stipulated that he could never disparage the bank or its employees. Brandon showed the letter to Jordan. "They're scared," she said. "They know this hearing is going to destroy them. They're hoping this money will be enough to buy your silence." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking $2.5 million is life-changing money," Brandon replied. "And I think it's your decision. I also think that no one in the world would blame you if you took it." Brandon looked down at the letter, at the staggering number, and at the word confidential. He thought about Maya's college fund, about his retirement, about real security, but then he thought about the 31 other victims, about the word "sir" arriving a moment too late, and about training manuals that taught employees to judge him by the color of his skin. "No." A smile spread across Jordan's face. "Good, because we're about to win a lot more than just money." On May 14th, every seat in room 402 of the Pennsylvania State Banking Commission was filled. An overflow crowd watched the live stream, which had already drawn 48,000 viewers before the hearing even started. Commissioner Patricia Williams was presiding. She was known for being stern but fair, and after 20 years on the commission, she thought she had seen everything. This was different. At 9 a.m., the hearing began. Commissioner Williams opened the proceedings. "We are here to investigate complaints of discriminatory practices at First Heritage Bank. This is a fact-finding hearing. All testimony will be given under oath. Recordings are permitted." At 9:30, Sarah Winters was called to the stand. After she was sworn in, Her high-priced attorney from Morrison and Blake took a seat beside her. Jordan Hayes began her examination. Miss Winters, on March 14th, you refused to process a deposit from Brandon Coleman. Why? The amount seemed inconsistent with the customer's standard deposits. Inconsistent with what? Jordan pressed. The check was very large. We have protocols for verification, she said. Did you call Premier Logistics to verify the check? I attempted to verify it through our fraud department. Did you call the company whose name was on the check? Miss Winters, yes or no? There was a long silence. Did you call Premier Logistics before destroying Mr. Coleman's check? No. How many forms of identification did you request from Mr. Coleman? 3. Is that standard for large deposits? Yes. And how many forms of ID do you typically request from customers who are depositing large amounts? It depends on the situation, she said evasively. That was when Jordan introduced her first piece of evidence. Video footage from the bank's own cameras, dated March 14th, played for the room. The timestamp showed 3 white customers depositing sums between $75,000 and $120,000. Each of them provided only one form of ID. Jordan turned back to the witness. Miss Winters, these customers deposited more money than Mr. Coleman, yet they each provided only a single form of ID. He offered 3 forms of identification, yet you denied him. What made you do that? You claim every case is unique, so tell me, what was so unique about Mr. Coleman? Sarah's lawyer jumps in. Objection. Relevance? Commissioner Williams overrules. She can answer the question. Sarah, on what grounds did you determine the check was fraudulent? It was based on my training and my professional experience. At that moment, Jordan presents the company's training manual as evidence. Are you familiar with this document? I am. And you were trained using these materials? Yes. Let's turn to page 23. It mentions unlikely customer profiles. Could you explain what that term means? It refers to clients whose financial activities don't seem to match the way they present themselves. And you found Mr. Coleman's presentation to be inconsistent because? A heavy silence fills the room. That silence says everything. The time is 11 a.m. Next, James Anderson takes the stand. He's sworn in, visibly on edge. Mr. Anderson, you got to the bank around 12:52 p.m. Can you describe what you saw? I noticed Mr. Coleman standing at the teller's counter. There was some paper scattered on the ground, and Miss Winters looked distressed. At what point did you realize who Mr. Coleman was? Right away. And what were your first words? I said, Mr. Coleman. Anderson pauses, his hesitation palpable. I also said, sir. Why did you choose that specific word? It's a term of respect. And did Miss Winters address him that way? It's possible she did. I can't remember. Jordan then plays an audio clip. Sarah's voice cuts through the room. Sir, this check is fraudulent. Sir, I need you to leave now. Mr. Anderson, it's clear Miss Winters used sir as a way to dismiss him. You claim you used it to show respect. What accounts for the difference in your intentions? I knew who Mr. Coleman was. So the respect was triggered by the recognition? No, Mr. Anderson, it's a very straightforward question. Had you not known who he was, would you still have respectfully called him sir? The room is quiet before he answers softly. I'm not sure. And that's the heart of the matter, isn't it? Respect should be automatic, not earned through recognition. The statement hangs in the air, leaving the room completely still. It's 1 p.m. Brandon Coleman is sworn in to testify. He insisted on being the final witness, wanting to have the last say. He appears composed and ready as Jordan starts with some preliminary questions. They cover the timeline, the basic facts. Then Jordan asks, Mr. Coleman, how did you feel when Regional Vice President Anderson addressed you as sir? Brandon turns his gaze to Commissioner Williams, then to the live stream camera, and to the 73,000 viewers tuned in. I felt he was showing respect to the man he knew, the CEO, the successful business owner. But that respect wasn't offered to the person who had walked in 52 minutes prior. The black man holding a check. Apparently, that man didn't merit a sir until his identity was confirmed. And therein lies the entire issue. A person's dignity shouldn't depend on their credentials. Respect shouldn't have to be earned through recognition. That word, sir, should have been present from the very start, not as an apology, but as the standard. The room falls silent once more. The cascade of comments on the live stream freezes. Commissioner Williams finally breaks the quiet. Mr. Coleman, what resolution are you hoping for? I want that training manual shredded. I want an independent body to oversee their practices. I demand a review of every complaint filed in the last 6 years, with compensation for all victims. I want full transparency in their reporting, and I want a guarantee that the next black person to walk into a First Heritage Bank will be treated with respect first, without needing to be recognized. It's 4 p.m. Based on the testimony and evidence, Commissioner Williams delivers her preliminary findings. This commission has found probable cause that First Heritage Bank has been involved in systematic discriminatory practices. Their training materials use coded language that unfairly targets customers of color. The bank's performance incentives encourage discriminatory behavior, and the management has failed to provide the necessary oversight to prevent it. Remedies will be determined in the final order, but they include a $4.3 million fine and a required third-party monitor for the next 3 years. Furthermore, all settlements must be publicly disclosed, and we are recommending individual liabilities. Miss Winters is to be terminated and permanently barred from the banking industry. Mr. Anderson will receive a formal reprimand and must undergo mandatory retraining. As for CEO Morrison, a personal fine and a new oversight requirement. The room breaks out in applause, but Commissioner Williams immediately brings them to order. The final ruling will be issued in 3 weeks. On June 3rd, the final order is released. It contains everything Commissioner Williams had outlined. In addition, First Heritage is ordered to create a $5 million fund for compensating victims, establish a transparent process for handling complaints, and publish annual demographic reports. Brandon Coleman is awarded a settlement of $850,000. It wasn't the $2.5 million they tried to offer him quietly. This was a victory earned through accountability, not a price for his silence. He gives $200,000 to the Civil Rights Legal Fund. He also establishes a scholarship at Temple University, the Gerald Coleman Scholarship, dedicated to students who will not allow themselves to be diminished. By September, Brandon enters a PNC bank, a different bank, a routine transaction, a deposit for $750,000 from a new contract. The teller greets him. "Good morning, sir. How may I assist you today?" "Sir," right from the start, before she knew his name, before she saw his credentials, just as it always should have been. Brandon makes the deposit. There are no requests for extra identification, no probing questions, no underlying assumptions, just professional, respectful service, the default setting. On the drive home, his mind drifts back to March 14th. He thinks about the ripped-up paper, about those 52 long minutes, and about the word sir, a word that came far too late to change anything that day. His daughter Maya asks him, "Daddy, was it all worth it? Going through that whole fight?" "Yeah." Brandon reflects on the 31 other people who finally got justice because of it. He thinks about that racist training manual being destroyed, and about the next black person who goes into a bank and is treated with respect from the moment they walk in. Yes, sweetheart, it was worth every second, because a person's dignity should never have to be proven. Dignity isn't something you prove you deserve. The title, sir, should be given in the first minute, not held back until the 52nd. If this story connected with you, if you agree that decency should be automatic, not awarded, then pass this along. Forget the view count. Share this for the one person who needs to be reminded that their value is absolute the instant they step through the door. If you agree that courtesy should never have a waiting period, hit that like button. Subscribe so you don't miss the stories that often go untold. Then, Head to the comments and share if you've ever felt this way. Let's work to make common decency the standard, not something out of the ordinary.